The silence in the office was deafening, broken only by the frantic clicking of keyboards and hushed whispers. They had just informed me that my services were no longer required, effective immediately. I stood there, a knot forming in my stomach, the fluorescent lights of the office buzzing above me like angry wasps. They thought they had won. They thought I would simply accept their decision and walk away quietly. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing, a plan was forming, and the eviction notices were already being drafted in my mind. If you truly love your sister, subscribe now. My name is Adeline, and until this morning, I was a silent partner at Stonegate Properties, a real estate firm specializing in commercial leasing. My day started like any other, reviewing contracts, negotiating terms, and ensuring the smooth operation of our buildings. I took immense pride in my work, meticulously managing every detail, from the smallest plumbing issue to the largest multi-million-dollar lease agreement. I treated the buildings like my children, nurturing them, protecting them, and ensuring their success. I had poured my heart and soul into this company, working tirelessly to build a reputation for excellence and integrity. That morning, however, a new tenant was moving into one of our prime locations, Innovatech, a tech startup buzzing with potential, led by a young, ambitious CEO named Ethan Sterling. As I prepared for the final lease signing, I received a call from my assistant, Sarah, informing me that Mr. Sterling requested a quick IT assistance regarding the Wi-Fi setup in his new office. I have a broad skill set, but normally that's something outside of my role. Still, I wanted to start this relationship with a good foot forward. After all, this was going to be one of our biggest tenants. Upon arriving at Innovatech, I was immediately intercepted by a young man, probably in his early 20s, wearing a smug grin and an expensive suit. He introduced himself as Chad Sterling, Ethan's son and VP of Operations. Before I could explain my role in the lease agreement, Chad snapped his fingers, pointed to a laptop, and said, "The Wi-Fi's down, fix it." His tone was dismissive, his eyes devoid of respect. I paused, momentarily taken aback by his arrogance. "I assure you I am perfectly capable. I'm just not exactly IT support," I replied calmly, attempting to clarify my position. "Look, lady, we're paying good money for this space. I need the internet up and running now. My dad doesn't like waiting," Chad retorted, his voice dripping with impatience. I took a deep breath, fighting back the urge to correct his misjudgment. Instead, I tried to patiently explain that I was actually there to finalize the lease agreement.
That's when Ethan strolled out of his office, a condescending look plastered across his face. "What's the holdup, Chad?" he barked. "Adeline here seems to think she's too good to fix the Wi-Fi," Chad sneered. Ethan looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on my business attire. "Well, Adeline, it seems we have a slight IT issue. We need problem solvers here, not people who think they're above getting their hands dirty." Before I could respond, Ethan continued, "Chad, are we still looking for a new IT guy?" Chad smirked. "Funny you mention it, Dad. I actually have someone in mind." Ethan fixed his gaze back on me. "Then I guess that makes your decision easy for us. Adeline, it is with great regret that we have to let you go." Stunned, I tried to explain that they were making a huge mistake, that I was the landlord, the one responsible for their lease. But my words fell on deaf ears. "I think it's best if you leave the premises at once," Ethan interrupted, gesturing towards the door. "I'll have security escort you out if necessary." The humiliation was crushing. My face burned with anger, but I knew that this wasn't the time for confrontation. I silently gathered my belongings, my heart pounding in my chest. As I walked out of Innovatech, I heard Chad chuckle. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out, IT girl." That's when my quiet rage began. And that's when I realized I had to make them pay for their arrogance, their disrespect, and their blatant disregard for my worth. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me. But they had only ignited a fire within me, a fire that would consume them all. I was just getting started. The person I trusted most was one of them. The elevator door slid open, and I stepped out into the bustling lobby, a ghost in my own building. The security guard, a man I'd known for years, averted his eyes, a mixture of pity and discomfort on his face. I knew what he was thinking. Another one bites the dust. As I walked past the familiar storefronts, the restaurants I frequented, the newsstand where I bought my morning coffee, I felt a strange sense of detachment,
as if I were watching a movie of someone else's life. I reached my office, the place I had called my second home for over a decade. My desk was already cleared, my personal belongings neatly packed in a cardboard box. A wave of nausea washed over me as I saw the emptiness, the stark reality of my sudden dismissal. It was as if I had been erased, my existence at Stonegate Properties reduced to a few forgotten files and a vacant chair. I picked up the box, its weight a physical manifestation of the emotional burden I carried. Leaving the building, I was met with the harsh glare of the afternoon sun, a stark contrast to the cool, sterile environment I had just left behind. The city seemed to mock me, its vibrant energy a painful reminder of my own stagnation. I drove home in a daze, the streets blurring into a kaleidoscope of colors. My mind raced, replaying the events of the morning, searching for answers, for some logical explanation for the injustice I had suffered. But there was none. It was a power play, a blatant display of arrogance, and I was the victim. I arrived at my apartment, a sanctuary that suddenly felt cold and empty. The silence amplified my despair, each tick of the clock a reminder of the precious time I was wasting, the career I had lost. I sank onto the couch, the box of my belongings lying unopened at my feet. I couldn't bring myself to confront the reality of my situation, the mountain of challenges that lay ahead. Sleep evaded me that night. My mind was a battlefield, thoughts colliding and clashing in a chaotic symphony of anger, frustration, and fear. I tossed and turned, haunted by images of Ethan's condescending smirk and Chad's dismissive sneer. I replayed every conversation, every interaction, searching for clues, for signs that I had somehow brought this upon myself. But I found nothing. I had been blindsided, betrayed by a system that valued power over loyalty, arrogance over competence. As the first rays of dawn crept through my window, I knew that I couldn't succumb to despair. I had to fight back. I had to reclaim my dignity, my reputation, my life. But how? They had all the power, all the resources. I was just one person, armed with nothing but my anger and a burning desire for retribution. The next few weeks were a blur of frantic activity. I consulted with lawyers, explored my legal options, but the outlook was bleak. I had no written contract, no ironclad agreement to protect me from their capricious decision. It was their word against mine, and they held all the cards. Desperate, I reached out to former colleagues, hoping to find allies, to gather information that could help me build a case against Ethan and Chad. But most were too afraid to speak out, fearing retribution from the powerful Sterling family. Some offered sympathy, empty platitudes that did little to soothe my wounded pride. Only a few were willing to risk their careers to help me, providing snippets of information, whispers of Ethan's questionable business practices, his reputation for ruthlessness and intimidation. I started digging, poring over financial records, scrutinizing lease agreements, searching for any hint of wrongdoing. I worked tirelessly, fueled by caffeine and adrenaline, driven by a singular purpose: to expose their lies, to bring them to justice. I was losing weight, my eyes were bloodshot, and my nerves were frayed, but I refused to give up. One evening, while sifting through a mountain of documents, I stumbled upon something that caught my eye: a discrepancy in a lease agreement for one of Stonegate's most valuable properties. A large commercial space had been leased to a shell company, a seemingly innocuous transaction that raised a red flag in my mind. I dug deeper, tracing the ownership of the shell company, and discovered a hidden connection to Ethan Sterling. It was a tangled web of offshore accounts and dummy corporations, but the pieces were slowly falling into place. Ethan was using Stonegate's properties to launder money, to conceal his illicit activities. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This was it, the smoking gun I had been searching for. I had finally found a way to strike back, to expose their corruption and bring them crashing down. But I knew that I had to be careful. Ethan was a powerful man with deep pockets and a network of influence. If he found out that I was onto him, he would stop at nothing to silence me. I had to plan my next move meticulously, to gather irrefutable evidence and to expose their crimes in a way that they couldn't ignore. The game had changed. I was no longer just seeking revenge for my personal humiliation. I was fighting to protect the integrity of Stonegate Properties, to expose the corruption that had infected its core. I was ready to take them down, no matter the cost. The weight of the world seemed to settle on my shoulders as I continued my investigation. Every late night, every skipped meal, every anxious thought was a sacrifice on the altar of justice. The fear was constant, a cold dread that gnawed at my insides, whispering doubts and warnings. But the image of their smug faces, the memory of their callous dismissal, fueled my resolve. I was not just fighting for myself. I was fighting for everyone who had been wronged, for everyone who had been silenced. মহান প্রতিশোধের গল্প আপনি কি প্রতিশোধ নিতে প্রস্তুত? এখনই সাবস্ক্রাইব করুন। মহান প্রতিশোধের গল্প আপনি কি প্রতিশোধ নিতে প্রস্তুত? এখনই সাবস্ক্রাইব করুন। My world crumbled around me, each piece of evidence I uncovered painting a darker picture than the last. Ethan's corruption ran deeper than I could have imagined, a tangled web of deceit that threatened to ensnare everything I held dear. The weight of it was crushing, the pressure unbearable. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford, my nights filled with nightmares of discovery, of being silenced, of losing everything. I was drowning in a sea of information, struggling to stay afloat, but the current was too strong, the waves too high. One afternoon, while working late at my makeshift office, my dining room table, I received a call from an anonymous number. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello, I answered, my voice barely a whisper. Adeline, isn't it? We know what you're up to. A distorted voice hissed on the other end.
We suggest you stop digging before you end up regretting it. The line went dead, leaving me trembling in fear. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking uncontrollably. They knew. They were watching me. The paranoia I had been fighting for weeks finally consumed me, turning my world into a terrifying labyrinth of shadows and suspicion. I felt trapped, alone, and utterly vulnerable. The next few days were a living nightmare. I jumped at every sound, every shadow, convinced that I was being followed. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't think straight. My apartment, once my sanctuary, now felt like a prison, its walls closing in on me, suffocating me with fear. I knew that I was losing it, that I was on the verge of a breakdown, but I couldn't stop. I had come too far, sacrificed too much to give up now. But the cost was immense. My health was failing, my relationships were strained, and my sanity was hanging by a thread. I was isolated from my friends, too scared to even see them. They didn't know what was happening, and I could barely bring myself to tell them. I could feel myself becoming more and more withdrawn. I knew that the old me was dying, and a new, harder version of myself was coming forth. I had to decide if I was going to be this new person or let it all go and return to nothing. It was the hardest decision I had ever had to make. One rainy evening, as I sat alone in my darkened apartment, staring blankly at the wall, I hit rock bottom. I was emotionally, physically, and mentally exhausted. I had lost my job, my reputation, my peace of mind. I had alienated my friends and family, and I was living in constant fear for my safety. I closed my eyes, tears streaming down my face, and I imagined myself giving up, walking away from it all, disappearing into the anonymity of the city. The thought was tempting, a siren song promising respite from the pain and the struggle. But then, an image flashed through my mind, Ethan's smug face, Chad's dismissive sneer. The memory ignited a spark of anger within me, a flicker of defiance that refused to be extinguished. No, I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them break me. I would fight back, no matter the cost. I would expose their lies, bring them to justice, and reclaim my life. I opened my eyes, my gaze hardening with resolve. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by a newfound determination. I was no longer just a victim. I was a warrior, a survivor, and I would not be silenced. I rose from the couch, my body aching, my mind racing. I had a plan to make. The pieces were starting to come together. I began organizing all the evidence I had gathered, meticulously cataloging each document, each transaction, each hidden connection. I needed to find a way to get this information to the authorities, to the media, to anyone who would listen. But I couldn't trust anyone. Ethan's influence reached far and wide, and I knew that he had people everywhere. I had to find a way to expose him anonymously, to protect myself from his retribution. I spent hours researching online, learning about secure communication channels, anonymous file sharing, and digital forensics. I became a ghost in the machine, a shadow in the digital world, moving silently and invisibly through the web of information. It was a dangerous game,
but I was willing to play it. I was ready to take the fight to them, to use their own tools against them. I would expose their corruption, dismantle their empire, and watch them crumble. I would not rest until justice was served. The day they tried to end me was the day revenge was born. I smiled. I played their game, but I was recording everything. The immediate problem was undeniable. Chad and Ethan believed they were untouchable. They strutted around Stonegate like they owned the world. That was the first crack in their armor. Arrogance makes you blind. I had to exploit that blindness. The first step was setting up a dead man's switch, a secure email containing all the evidence, scheduled to be sent to several news outlets and regulatory agencies if I failed to check in every day. It was a safety net, a digital insurance policy against Ethan's potential attempts to silence me permanently. The second step was more delicate, gathering more evidence without alerting them. I needed access to Stonegate's internal servers, to their financial records, to their communication logs. This was where my IT background came in handy. I knew their systems, their vulnerabilities, their blind spots. I started by creating a fake persona, a fictitious IT consultant offering a free security audit. I sent a proposal to Stonegate, highlighting some minor vulnerabilities I had discovered during a preliminary scan. Chad, eager to cut costs and impress his father, fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. He invited me in for a meeting, giving me the access I needed. Under the guise of conducting a security audit, I roamed through Stonegate's offices, scanning their network, mapping their systems, and planting digital tripwires. I installed a keylogger on Chad's computer, capturing his every keystroke, his every password, his every incriminating email. I also installed hidden cameras in Ethan's office, disguised as smoke detectors, recording his meetings, his phone calls, his every move. It was a risky game, but I was careful, methodical, and relentless. I knew that one wrong move could expose me, but I was willing to take the chance. The hunger for justice was all-consuming. There were close calls. One afternoon, as I was downloading data from Stonegate's server room, Chad walked in unexpectedly. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, but I managed to maintain my composure. "Just running some diagnostics," I said, feigning a casual tone. "Everything seems to be in order." Chad eyed me suspiciously, but he didn't press the issue. He just shrugged and walked out, leaving me to breathe a sigh of relief.
That was a wake-up call, a reminder of the danger I was in. I needed to be more careful. I needed to be smarter. The keylogger on Chad's computer proved to be a goldmine. He was careless, arrogant, and utterly convinced of his own invincibility. He used the same password for everything: his email, his bank accounts, his social media. It was a hacker's dream come true. Through his email, I discovered a series of incriminating communications between Ethan and several offshore entities, confirming my suspicions of money laundering. I also found evidence of bribery, extortion, and fraud. The Sterling family's empire was built on a foundation of corruption and deceit. The hidden cameras in Ethan's office captured even more damning evidence. I watched hours of footage, meticulously documenting every illegal activity, every unethical transaction, every instance of abuse of power. I saw Ethan intimidating employees, threatening competitors, and manipulating politicians. He was a monster, a predator, and he needed to be stopped. The anticipation was building, a slow burn that consumed me from the inside out. I knew that the time was coming, that I was on the verge of exposing them all, but I had to be patient. I had to wait for the right moment, the perfect opportunity to strike. The final piece of the puzzle came unexpectedly. While reviewing the footage from Ethan's office, I noticed something strange, a series of encrypted files on his computer. I knew that he was hiding something big. I spent days trying to crack the encryption, using every tool and technique I could find. It was a frustrating and time-consuming process, but I refused to give up. Finally, after weeks of relentless effort, I cracked the code. The files contained a detailed plan to defraud Stonegate's investors, to siphon off millions of dollars into offshore accounts, and to leave the company bankrupt. It was a betrayal of epic proportions, a scheme that would ruin countless lives. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Ethan was willing to destroy everything, to sacrifice everyone, just to line his own pockets. That was the final straw. That was the moment I knew I had to act, no matter the consequences. I had all the evidence I needed. I had a plan, and I was ready to unleash my revenge. Their biggest weakness? They thought they were untouchable. মহান প্রতিষ্ঠার গল্প আপনি কি প্রতিশোধ নিতে প্রস্তুত? এখনই সাবস্ক্রাইব করুন।
The encrypted files exposed a web of deceit so intricate it made my stomach churn. Ethan planned to bleed Stonegate dry, leaving employees jobless and investors ruined. He saw them as pawns, disposable tools to fuel his insatiable greed. I printed every document, backed up every file, creating multiple copies stored in secure locations. I armed myself with truth, the most potent weapon against their lies. Now it was time to set the stage, to lure them into a trap of their own making. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. They would deny everything, destroy the evidence, and silence me for good. I needed to expose them publicly, to reveal their crimes to the world. I decided to use their arrogance against them, to exploit their belief that they were untouchable. I crafted an anonymous email, a carefully worded message sent to Ethan and Chad, hinting at a leak of sensitive information. I baited them with the promise of a large sum of money in exchange for their silence. I suggested a meeting at a secluded location, a place where they felt safe, a place where they thought they had the upper hand. It was a gamble, but I knew they wouldn't be able to resist. The lure of easy money, the opportunity to silence a potential threat, was too tempting to pass up. I chose an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a dilapidated structure with a dark history. It was the perfect setting for a confrontation, a place where secrets could be buried and justice could be served. I spent days preparing the warehouse, rigging it with hidden cameras and microphones, turning it into a digital trap. I wanted to capture everything, to document their every word, their every action, to ensure that they couldn't deny their guilt. I also alerted the authorities, providing them with the evidence I had gathered and the location of the meeting. I told them to stay hidden, to wait for my signal, to only intervene when necessary. I knew that involving the police was a risk, but I couldn't take any chances. Ethan was a dangerous man, and I needed to be prepared for anything. The night of the meeting arrived, and I felt a mix of fear and excitement coursing through my veins. I dressed in dark clothing, concealing my identity, becoming a shadow in the night. I arrived at the warehouse early, checking the cameras, adjusting the microphones, ensuring that everything was in place. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I waited for their arrival. It was time. A black SUV pulled up to the warehouse, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Ethan and Chad emerged from the vehicle, their faces grim, their eyes scanning the surroundings. They were nervous but determined. They walked towards the warehouse, their footsteps echoing in the silence. I watched them on the monitor, my finger hovering over the record button. They had taken the bait. The trap was set.
I stepped out of the shadows, confronting them in the center of the warehouse. "Hello, gentlemen," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Ethan's face turned red with anger. "Who are you?" he demanded. "And what do you want?" I smiled. "I want justice," I replied, "and I'm here to make sure you pay for your crimes." Chad stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "You think you can take us down?" he sneered. "You're nothing but a nobody." "I may be a nobody," I said, "but I have the evidence to destroy your entire empire." I gestured to the hidden cameras. "Everything you say, everything you do, is being recorded." Ethan's face paled. He knew that he was in trouble. He tried to regain control, to intimidate me with his power and his wealth, but it was too late. The game was over. I activated the cameras, broadcasting the live feed to the news outlets and regulatory agencies I had contacted. The world was watching. It was time for the truth to be revealed. But as the feed went live, Ethan smirked and whispered one sentence that sent ice through my veins. "Check your dead man's switch." "মহান প্রতিশোধের গল্প আপনি কি প্রতিশোধ নিতে প্রস্তুত? এখনই subscribe করুন." The words hit me like a physical blow. My dead man's switch? How? I had secured everything, triple-checked the encryption, and used a proxy network only accessible through a quantum-encrypted server. It was impossible. My mind raced, piecing together the puzzle. The IT audit, the access I was granted so easily. It was all a setup. They knew. They had been playing me from the beginning. Ethan's smirk widened as he saw the realization dawn on my face. "You thought you were so clever," he sneered, "but you're just a pawn in our game."
Chad laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed through the warehouse. "We knew about your little plan all along. We let you gather your evidence, lead us here, and now," he snapped his fingers, and the warehouse doors slammed shut, plunging us into darkness. A group of men emerged from the shadows, their faces hidden behind masks. They were Ethan's enforcers, his personal army, ready to do his bidding. My carefully constructed plan was collapsing around me. The police, alerted just hours ago, wouldn't arrive in time. But I had one card left to play. As the enforcers advanced, I triggered the secondary protocol I'd set up on the broadcasting system. It was a deepfake video, meticulously crafted using hours of footage I'd gathered, showing Ethan confessing to his crimes. The video, indistinguishable from reality, played on every news channel, every social media platform, every screen in the city. It was a tsunami of truth, a digital reckoning that couldn't be stopped. Ethan's face contorted in disbelief as he watched the video, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before his eyes. The enforcers hesitated, their loyalty wavering as they witnessed their boss's downfall.
Chad stood frozen, his arrogance replaced by a look of pure terror. The police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached the warehouse. It was over. Ethan's empire, built on lies and deceit, was about to crumble. The police stormed the warehouse, arresting Ethan, Chad, and their enforcers. The evidence I had gathered, combined with the deepfake confession, was irrefutable. The news of their arrest spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the city. Stonegate's stock plummeted, investors panicked, and the Sterling family's reputation was shattered beyond repair. The truth had been revealed, and justice had been served. As Ethan was led away in handcuffs, he looked at me, his eyes filled with rage and defeat. "You haven't won," he snarled. "This isn't over." I just smiled. "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's finally over." In the days that followed, the full extent of Ethan's crimes was revealed. The money laundering, the bribery, the extortion, the fraud, it all came crashing down around him. He lost everything: his wealth, his power, his freedom. He was sentenced to decades in prison, his life ruined, his legacy tarnished forever. Chad, implicated in his father's schemes, faced similar consequences. He lost his inheritance, his status, and his future. The Sterling family, once a symbol of wealth and power, became a pariah, ostracized by society. I watched it all unfold from a distance, my heart filled with a mixture of satisfaction and exhaustion. The weight of the past few months lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of closure. I had reclaimed my life, exposed the truth, and brought justice to those who had wronged me. But the experience had changed me. I was no longer the naive, trusting person I once was. I had seen the darkness in humanity, the depths of corruption, and the lengths to which people would go to protect their own interests. The scars of betrayal would always remain, a reminder of the pain I had endured. But I had also learned a valuable lesson, that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person can make a difference. That truth, armed with determination, can conquer even the most powerful of enemies. I walked away from the wreckage, leaving the past behind. I had a new life to build, a future to create. The world needed people willing to fight for what's right. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.